Stephen IV was Roman. The son of a Roman noble called Marinus, Stephen belonged to the same family which also produced the popes Sergius II and Adrian II. In October 816, he crowned Louis the Pious as emperor at Rheims and persuaded him to release some Roman political prisoners he held in custody. He returned to Rome by way of Ravenna sometime in November and died the following January. Extremely popular among the Roman people, he would be made pope within 10 days of his predecessor's death. In turn, he would make the Roman people swear fidelity to Emperor Louis I the Pious. It is also believed that Stephen asked Louis to enforce reforms for the clergy who lived under the rule of Croix-de-Gang. This included ensuring that the men and women who lived there were to stay in separate convents, and that they were to hold the houses under a title of common property. He also regulated how much food and wine they could consume. He discontinued Leo III's policies of favoring clergy over lay aristocracy. He was buried at St. Peter's. St. Pascal I was Roman. Pascal was a member of an aristocratic Roman family. Before his election to the papacy, he was abbot of St. Stephen's Monastery, which served pilgrims. In Rome in 823, he crowned Lothair I as Holy Roman Emperor. He rebuilt a number of churches in Rome, including 3 basilicas. The Liber Sensuum says that Pascal was from the Massimo family, as was his predecessor, Stephen IV. His reign would see the evangelization of the Danes in 822, the crowning of Lothair I in 823, and the sheltering of exiled monks from the Byzantine Empire who had fled persecution for their opposition to iconoclasm. Pascal rebuilt 3 basilicas of Rome: Santa Prassede, Santa Maria in Dominica, and Santa Cecilia in Trastevere. In addition, Pascal added 2 oratories to Old St. Peter's Basilica, Saints Processus et Martinianus, and Saints Xistus et Fabianus, which did not survive the 16th century renovation of St. Peter's. Pascal died on the 11th of February, 824. The Roman Curia refused him the honor of burial within St. Peter's Basilica because of his harsh government of the Roman people. He was instead buried in the Basilica of Santa Prassede, which also contains the famous Episcopa Theodora mosaic of his mother. Pascal was canonized in the late 16th century. Eugene II was Roman. A native of Rome, he was chosen by nobles to succeed Pascal I as pope, despite the clergy and the people favoring Zinzinus. The influence of the Carolingian Franks on the selection of popes was then firmly established. Pope Eugene convened a council at Rome in 826 to condemn simony and suspend untrained clergy. It was decreed that schools were to be established at cathedral churches and other places to give instruction in sacred and secular literature. His involvement in the Byzantine iconoclasm controversy was largely inconsequential. Eugene is described by his biographer as simple and humble, learned and eloquent, handsome and generous, a lover of peace, and wholly occupied with the thought of doing what was pleasing to God. Not only were ignorant bishops and priests to be suspended till they had acquired sufficient learning to perform their sacred duties, but it was decreed that, as in some localities there were neither masters nor zeal for learning, masters were to be attached to the episcopal palaces, cathedral churches, and other places to give instruction in sacred and polite literature. It also ruled against priests wearing secular dress or engaging in secular occupations. Simony was forbidden. Eugene also adopted various provisions for the care of the poor, widows, and orphans, and on that account received the name of Father of the People. Valentine was Roman. He was unusually close to his predecessor, Eugene II, rumored to be his son or his lover, and became pope before being ordained as a priest. He was a nobleman and elected by nobility, which later became the custom. His biographer in the Liber Pontificalis praises his piety and purity of morals, which won him the favor of Pascal I, who raised him to the rank of archdeacon. He also was clearly favored by Pascal's successor, Eugene II, to the point where rumors were circulated that Valentine was really Eugene's son. According to Louis-Marie de Comines, other rumors declared that Valentine and Eugene were involved in an illicit relationship. There were no imperial representatives present during the election, and Valentine had no opportunity to ratify his election with the Carolingian emperor, as he was dead within 5 weeks, dying on the 10th of October, 827. The election of Valentine was another sign of the increased influence the Roman nobility was having in the papal electoral process. Not only had they managed to get one of their own elected, but they also took part in the election itself. This gradual encroachment into the papal electoral process would reach its nadir during the 10th century, when the papacy became the plaything of the Roman aristocracy. Gregory IV was Roman. His pontificate was notable for the papacy's attempts to intervene in the quarrels between Emperor Louis the Pious and his sons. It also saw the breakup of the Carolingian Empire in 843. The son of a Roman patrician called John, Gregory was apparently an energetic but mild churchman, renowned for his learning. During his reign, he would see conflicts between himself and the three sons of the Emperor Louis. Lothair, Emperor and King of Italy, would be the most open in his conflicts with Gregory, openly disobeying the Pope with the support of the majority of the Frankish bishops, backing him. Gregory would act as mediator for the Frankish emperor and kings, though after the Treaty of Verdun and the division of the empire, Lothair and Gregory would come to have increasing territorial disputes. Gregory contributed to the architectural development of Rome. Gregory's pontificate witnessed the end of the iconoclasm controversy in the Byzantine Empire. Gregory also supported the candidacy of John IV, the Bishop of Naples. He was buried in St. Peter's Basilica. Sergius II was Roman. His pontificate saw the Arab raid against Rome as well as the city's redevelopment. Nominated by the Roman aristocracy, Sergius would suppress his opposition, the people of Rome who supported the deacon John. Emperor Lothair I would send his army to Rome as Sergius had not sought imperial approval prior to his coronation, and forced an agreement with Sergius to crown his son Louis as king. Sergius contributed to urban redevelopment in Rome, improving churches, aqueducts, and the Lateran Basilica. He and his brother Benedict funded their building plans by selling appointments to various church positions to the highest bidder. During his pontificate, the outskirts of Rome were ravaged, and the churches of St. Peter and St. Paul were sacked by Arabs, who also approached Portus and Ostia in August 846. During the raid, he and the people of Rome looked on helplessly as they hid behind the Aurelian walls. Despite having been forewarned of the intentions of the raiders, Sergius is seen as having not acted adequately enough to prepare for that which eventuated. Sergius died while negotiating between the patriarchs of Aquileia and Grado. Saint Leo IV was Roman. He's remembered for repairing Roman churches that had been damaged during the Arab raid against Rome, and for building the Leonine Wall around Vatican Hill to protect the city. Pope Leo organized a league of Italian cities who fought and won the sea battle of Ostia against the Saracens. The Battle of Ostia was one of the most famous in history of the papacy of the Middle Ages, and is celebrated in a famous fresco by Raphael and his pupils in his rooms of the Vatican Palace in the Vatican City. Raphael's The Fire in the Borgo celebrates the incident in which, according to legend, Leo stopped a fire in the Pilgrims' district by making the sign of the cross. Leo IV held 3 synods, the one in 850 distinguished by the presence of Emperor Louis II, but the other 2 of little importance. In 853, he traveled to Ravenna to settle a dispute with the archbishop. As the archbishop was on good terms with Emperor Lothair I, the Pope had little success. The history of the papal struggle with Hincmar of Reims, which began during Leo's pontificate, belongs properly to that of Nicholas I. Before his death in 855, the Pope welcomed Ethelwulf, King of Wessex, and his sons, including the 7-year-old Alfred the Great, who at 5 had already met him in 853, as pilgrims to Rome. Benedict III was Roman. Little is known of Benedict's life before his papacy. His father was named Peter. Benedict was educated and lived in Rome and was appointed by Pope Leo IV as cardinal priest of the Church of San Callisto. Benedict had a reputation for learning and piety. Benedict III was elected upon the refusal of Adrian, the initial choice of the clergy and people. Arsenius, Bishop of Horta, intercepted the legates sent to advise the emperor of the election and persuaded them to betray Benedict and convince the emperor name the bishop's son Anastasius instead. Anastasius had previously been excommunicated by Leo IV. The legates returned with the imperial envoys and had Benedict's election disavowed, and Anastasius installed. Anastasius took his place at the Lateran, and Benedict was imprisoned. However, local popular opinion was so strong that the Franks recognized Benedict's consecration. Benedict treated Anastasius and his adherents leniently. The schism helped to weaken the hold of the emperors upon the popes. Benedict intervened in the conflict between Lothair II of Lotharingia, Louis II of Italy, and Charles of Provence on the death of their father, Emperor Lothair I. He wrote to the Frankish bishops, rebuking them for remaining silent in the face of the disorder affecting the Carolingian realms. Ethelwulf of Wessex and his son, the future King Alfred the Great, visited Rome in Benedict's reign. St. Nicholas I was Roman. He is remembered as a consolidator of papal authority, exerting decisive influence on the historical development of the papacy and its position among the Christian nations of Western Europe. Nicholas I asserted that the Pope should have suzerainty over all Christians, even royalty, in matters of faith and morals. Nicholas refused King Lothair II of Lotharingia's request for an annulment of his marriage to Teutberga. When a council pronounced in favor of annulment, Nicholas I declared the council deposed, its messengers excommunicated, and its decisions invalid. Despite pressure from the Carolingians, who laid siege to Rome, his decision held. During his reign, relations with the Byzantine Empire soured because of his support for Patriarch Ignatius of Constantinople, who had been removed from his post in favor of Photius I. His claims of supremacy over territories outside his jurisdiction, the incorporation of the Filioque in the Constantinopolitan Nicene Creed, and his pressure on Bulgaria to remain under Roman rule, provoked tensions between Rome and Constantinople, leading to his excommunication by the Greeks at the Fourth Council of Constantinople. Nicholas decreed that the figure of the rooster should be placed on every church. The rooster has served as a religious icon and reminder of Peter's denial of Christ since that time, with some churches still having the rooster on the steeple today. Adrian II was Roman. He continued the policy of his predecessor, Nicholas I. Despite seeking good relations with Louis II of Italy, he was placed under surveillance and his wife and daughters were killed by Louis's supporters. Adrian II maintained, but with less energy, the policies of his predecessor, Nicholas I. King Lothair II of Lotharingia, who died in 869, left Adrian to mediate between the Frankish kings with a view to secure the imperial inheritance to Lothair's brother, Louis II of Italy. Adrian sought to maintain good relations with Louis, since the latter's campaigns in southern Italy had the potential to free the papacy from the threat posed by the Muslims. Patriarch Photius I of Constantinople, shortly after the council in which he had pronounced sentence of deposition against Pope Nicholas I, was driven from the Patriarchate by a new Byzantine emperor, Basil the Macedonian, who favored Photius's rival, Ignatius. The Fourth Council of Constantinople was convoked to decide this matter. At this council, Adrian was represented by legates who presided at the condemnation of Photius as a heretic, but did not succeed in coming to an understanding with Ignatius on the subject of jurisdiction over the Bulgarian Church. John VIII was Roman. John devoted much of his papacy attempting to halt and reverse the Muslim gains in southern Italy and their march northwards. When his efforts to obtain assistance from either the Franks or the Byzantines failed, John strengthened the defenses of Rome. He supported Methodius of Thessalonica in his mission to the Slavs, defended him against the Carolingian rulers and Bavarian clergy, and authorized the translation of the Bible into Slavonic. John also extended diplomatic recognition to the Duchy of Croatia and resolved the Photian Schism. John's pontificate ended with his assassination, and the papacy became significantly weaker in the aftermath. Obtaining relatively little support from outside sources, John fell back on what resources he could command. He reinforced the walls previously restored by Pope Leo IV. He also founded a papal fleet. John was anxious that the Duchy of Croatia would follow in the steps of Bulgaria, which had recently accepted the spiritual authority of Constantinople rather than that of Rome. After the overthrow of the pro-Byzantine Zdislav in 879, John thanked the new Duke, Branimir, for returning Croatia to papal jurisdiction. In return, John recognized Croatian independence from the Carolingians. He was assassinated in 882 by his own clerics. He was first poisoned and then clubbed to death. Marinus I was Roman. Controversially at the time, he was already a bishop when he became pope and had served as papal legate to Constantinople. He was also erroneously called Martin II, leading to the second pope named Martin to take the name Martin IV. Born at Gallesa, Marinus was the son of a priest. He was ordained as a deacon by Pope Nicholas I. He first served as Bishop of Caere. On 3 separate occasions, he had been employed by the 3 popes who preceded him as legate to Constantinople, his mission in each case having reference to the controversy started by Patriarch Photios I of Constantinople. In 882, he was sent on behalf of Pope John VIII to Duke Athanasius of Naples to warn him not to trade with the Muslims of southern Italy. Marinus I was elected to succeed John VIII as Bishop of Rome in around the end of December 882. This papal election was controversial because Marinus had already been consecrated as Bishop of Caere. At the time, a bishop was expected never to move to another see. Among his first acts as pope were the restitution of Formosa as Cardinal Bishop of Portus and the anathematizing of Photius I. Due to his respect for Alfred the Great, he freed the Anglo-Saxons of the Schola Anglorum in Rome from tribute and taxation. He also is recorded to have sent a piece of the True Cross to Alfred as a gift. He died in May or June 884. Saint Adrian III was Roman. He served for little more than a year, during which he worked to help the people of Italy in a very troubled time of famine and war. According to Jean Mabillon, his birth name was Agapitus. Reginald L. Poole believes that Mabillon confused Adrian III, who succeeded Marinus I, with Agapitus II, who succeeded Marinus II a century later. Adrian labored hard to alleviate the misery of the people of Italy, prey to famine and to continuous war. He is also known to have written a letter condemning the Christians of both Muslim-ruled and Christian-ruled parts of Spain for being too friendly with the followers of the Talmud in these lands. Adrian died in July 885 at San Cesario sul Panaro, not long after embarking on a trip to Worms in modern Germany. The purpose of the journey was to attend an imperial diet after being summoned by Emperor Charles the Fat to settle the imperial succession and discuss the rising power of the Saracens. Adrian's death and subsequent burial in the church of San Silvestro Nonantola Abbey near Modena is commemorated in the sculpted reliefs that frame the doorway of this church. His relics are found near the high altar, and his tomb at once became a popular place of pilgrimage. His cult was confirmed by Pope Leo XIII on the 2nd of June 1891, and his feast day is celebrated on the 8th of July. Stephen V was Roman. In his dealings with Photius I of Constantinople, as in his relations with the young Slavic Orthodox Church, he pursued the policy of Pope Nicholas I. He was elected to succeed Adrian III on the account of his holiness on May 17, 885, but was not accepted by the Holy Roman Emperor Charles III the Fat. Stephen was called upon to face a famine caused by drought and by locusts, and as the papal treasury was empty, he had to fall back on his father's wealth to relieve the poor, to redeem captives, and to repair churches. To promote order, he adopted Guy III of Spoleto as his son and crowned him emperor in 891. He also recognized Louis the Blind as King of Provence. He had also opposed the arbitrary proceedings of the archbishops of Bordeaux and Ravenna, and resisted the attacks which Patriarch Photius I of Constantinople made on the Holy See. His resistance was successful, and Emperor Leo VI sent Photius into exile. When writing against Photius, Stephen begged the emperor to protect papal territory, which led to the Byzantines' reoccupation of southern Italy. In 887 to 888, Stephen wrote that Christian slaves of Muslims who were mutilated by their captors could become priests. He also excused them if they murdered during their captivity. Formosus was Roman. His reign as pope was troubled, marked by interventions in power struggles over the Patriarchate of Constantinople, the Kingdom of West Francia, and the Holy Roman Empire. Because he sided with Arnulf of Carinthia against Lambert of Spoleto, Formosus's remains were exhumed and put on trial in the Cadaver Synod. Several of his immediate successors were primarily preoccupied by the controversial legacy of his pontificate. Prior to becoming pope by unanimous election, he would undertake diplomatic missions to Porto, Bulgaria, and West Francia. He would be forced by the Emperor Guy III of Spoleto to crown his son Lambert co-emperor in 892. Though Arnulf of Carinthia would soon seize power in 895 and have Formosus crown him emperor in St. Peter's Basilica. He also had to contend with the Saracens, who were attacking Lazio. In 897, Stephen VI, successor to Boniface VI, would hold that the then-deceased Formosus had been undeserving of the papal title. He would desecrate the body by removing Formosus' clothes, 3 fingers from his right hand, and finally by throwing the corpse into the Tiber. Formosus' corpse would be retrieved by a monk. Following Stephen's death, Formosus was reinterred in St. Peter's Basilica, and trials against the deceased were banned. Though John XXIII of the 20th century would condemn John XXIII of the 15th century as an antipope and steal his name. Boniface VI was Roman. His election came about as a result of riots soon after the death of Pope Formosus. Prior to his reign, he had twice incurred a sentence of deprivation of orders as a subdeacon and as a priest. After a pontificate of 15 days, he is said by some to have died of the gout, by others to have been forcibly ejected to make way for Stephen VI, the candidate of the Spoletan party. At a synod in Rome held by John IX in 898, his election was pronounced null and void. Stephen VI was Roman. He is best known for instigating the Cadaver Synod, which ultimately led to his downfall and death. His father was a priest named John. Stephen was made Bishop of Anagni by Pope Formosus. Stephen is chiefly remembered in connection with his conduct towards the remains of Pope Formosus. The rotting corpse of Formosus was exhumed and put on trial before an unwilling synod of the Roman clergy in the so-called Cadaver Synod in January 897. With the corpse propped up on a throne, a deacon was appointed to answer for the deceased pontiff. During the trial, Formosus's corpse was condemned for performing the functions of a bishop when he had been deposed and for accepting the papacy while he was the Bishop of Porto, among other revived charges that had been leveled against him in the strife during the pontificate of John VIII. The corpse was found guilty, and all ordinations performed by Formosus were annulled. The trial excited a tumult. Though the instigators of the deed may actually have been Formosus's Spoletan enemies, notably Guy IV of Spoleto, who had recovered their authority in Rome at the beginning of 897 by renouncing their broader claims in central Italy. The scandal ended in Stephen's imprisonment and his death by strangulation that summer. Romanus was Roman. His short reign occurred during a period of partisan strife in the Catholic Church amid the violence and disorder in central Italy. His pontificate ended when he was deposed and confined to a monastery. Romanus was elected to succeed Stephen VI in August 897. He was generally considered to be pro-Formosan and annulled all the acts and decrees of his predecessor. This was criticized by the 15th century historian Bartolomeo Platina, who wrote that these popelings studied nothing else but to extinguish the memory and honor of their predecessors. Romanus's reign as pope ended when it is said that he was made a monk, a term used when a pope is deposed and often confined to a monastery. Romanus's date of death is unknown. The power struggle between supporters of Formosus and those of Stephen continued for over 10 years. Romanus was succeeded by Theodore II, who was only pope for 20 days, during which time he had Formosus's body reburied and held a synod annulling the Cadaver Synod. This was reaffirmed by John IX, who held synods reaffirming that of Theodore II, and he further banned the trial of people after their death. In turn, Sergius III later annulled the synods of Theodore II and John IX and reinstated the validity of the Cadaver Synod. Theodore II was Roman. His short reign occurred during a period of partisan strife in the Catholic Church, which was entangled with a period of violence and disorder in central Italy. His main act as pope was to annul the recent Cadaver Synod, therefore reinstating the acts and ordinations of Pope Formosus, which had themselves been annulled by Pope Stephen VI. He also had the body of Formosus recovered from the river Tiber and reburied with honor. He died in office in late December 897. Theodore II was elected to succeed the deposed Romanus as pope. Flodoard, a 10th century French chronicler, only credited Theodore with a 12-day reign, while in his History of the Popes, Alexis François Artaud de Montaut listed Theodore's reign as being 20 days, from the 12th of February to the 3rd of March, 898. Like Romanus, Theodore was a supporter of Formosus. Some historians believe that Romanus had been deposed because he had not acted to restore Formosus's honor quickly enough, though others suggest that he was removed by supporters of Stephen VI. Theodore was buried at St. Peter's Basilica, but his tomb was destroyed during the demolition of the old basilica in the 17th century. After Theodore's death, both John IX and Sergius III claimed to have been elected pope. The latter was excommunicated and driven from the city, though he did later become pope in 904. John IX was Roman. Little is known about John IX before he became pope. Born in Tivoli to a man named Rampoaldo, he was ordained as a Benedictine priest by Pope Formosus. With the support of the powerful Duke of Spoleto, he was elected pope in early 898, following the sudden death of Pope Theodore II. With a view to diminish the violence of factionalism in Rome, John held several synods in Rome and elsewhere in 898. They not only confirmed the judgment of Pope Theodore II in granting Christian burial to Pope Formosus, but also at a council held at Ravenna decreed that the records of the Cadaver Synod held by Pope Stephen VI, which had condemned him, should be burned. Reordinations were forbidden, and those of the clergy who had been degraded by Stephen were restored to the ranks from which he had deposed them. The custom of plundering the palaces of bishops or popes on their death was ordered to be put down both by the spiritual and temporal authorities. He would condone the Moravians who opposed the German subjugation to form their own hierarchy. He further banned the trial of people after their death, though this has gone largely ignored by the 20th and 21st century popes, who see popularity as being more important than truth